We never forgot you. That's what a U.S. general told a trembling veteran as the town stood frozen watching justice arrive in uniform. This wasn't just about a coffee or a cruel insult. This was about how one act of disrespect awakened a brotherhood that refuses to let our heroes stand alone. Before we dive in, let us know where you're looking from in the comments. If you believe in honoring everyday heroes, give this video a like and hit subscribe. A brand new story drops tomorrow. Let's get started. At 6:45 a.m. every Thursday, the air outside Mel's Fuel and Diner in Boone, North Carolina, carried the sharp bite of mountain frost. Inside, the smell of bacon and black coffee wrapped itself around cracked vinyl booths and sleepy country music. Outside stood a man, Henry Walker, 78 years old. His coat was frayed at the seams. His hands, spotted with time, clutched a tattered cap with a faded Marine Corps emblem. It belonged to his daughter, Lieutenant Ava Walker, killed in Kabul 12 years earlier. Henry didn't talk much. He simply stood near pump number 3 sipping weak coffee from a dented thermos. His boots were worn, his steps slow, but his spine still straight. Locals knew him as Hank. Some thought he was just an old-timer with stories. But those who watched closely saw something deeper. A rhythm in how he folded his cap. A pause before he touched his chest at the flag's rise. He wasn't looking for sympathy. He came for routine. And maybe to feel close to his daughter, one sunrise at a time. But this morning, something would disrupt the silence, and the man they overlooked would become the man everyone remembered. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. Frost still clung to the diner's windows like dusted lace. Henry Walker leaned against the old wooden bench near the entrance, exhaling mist into the cold air. Inside, Sammy, the 30-year-old short-order cook with tattoos and a restless soul, was wiping down the counters. He always saved a cup of coffee, 2 sugars, no cream for Hank. Today started no different, until the roar of 2 motorcycles shattered the calm. They pulled up with the arrogance of thunder chrome glinting, engines growling. The riders, Rick and Duke, wore leather vests stained with arrogance. Locals had seen them around. Not quite criminals, but the kind who leaned just a little too far over the line. Rick sneered the moment he saw Henry. "Look at this old relic." He barked, still pretending he served. Probably here hoping someone will buy his gas again. Sammy's head snapped up. The rag in his hand froze mid-swipe. The diner went quiet. Henry didn't respond. He just lowered his gaze. The cap in his hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from cold and restraint. Rick wasn't done. He stepped closer, boots leaving mud on the diner's tiles. "You get free coffee for that dusty jacket. What did you serve in Fantasyland?" He laughed. Loud, cruel, hoping others would join in. They didn't. Sammy stepped out from behind the counter, his voice calm but cutting. "You have no idea who you're mocking." Rick snorted. "And you are." "I'm someone who actually gives a damn. That man out there lost his daughter in Kabul. He's not here for your approval. He's here because he's earned more than you ever will." The air grew still. A couple near the window stood up silently and walked out. The tension was thick enough to slice. Henry still said nothing. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a photo creased, sun-faded, and stared at it quietly. Duke, trying to recover the moment, muttered, "Bet he made the whole thing up." Sammy didn't blink. "He helped me dig my car out of a snowbank last year, in the middle of a whiteout. Stayed with me 2 hours, didn't say a word, just did what needed doing." Rick slammed his hand on the counter. "I don't need a sermon from a fry cook." "No," Sammy replied, "but maybe you need a reminder." Just then, the front door creaked. An old woman, Mrs. Thelma, stood with her cane, eyes narrowed. "That man buried a hero," she said. "My grandson served with his daughter. She saved 5 men before the blast took her. You owe him your silence. Rick looked around. No more laughter. No more power. Just eyes watching. Witnesses and something shifting. Rick grumbled under his breath and pulled out his phone. Bunch of cowards, he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Then, dialing, he said with a smirk. Yeah, Tommy, bring the boys. We got ourselves a situation. Little diner on Route 17. Time to remind some folks who's in charge. The call ended. The chill in the air wasn't from the weather anymore. Mrs. Thelma's lips tightened. She returned to her booth without another word. Sammy wiped his hands on his apron, trying not to let the adrenaline show. Henry just sat quietly, staring into his coffee, but his fingers curled tighter around the cap. 20 minutes passed. Then, the silence broke the sound of tires crunching gravel, engines humming low and slow. Not the roar of bikers, but something heavier. A black SUV rolled into the lot, then another, then a third. They were followed by a military-grade Humvee, marked only with a small U.S. flag sticker on the side mirror. Within moments, 4 men in tactical gear stepped out. No names, no patches, just calm authority. Behind them, the unmistakable whirring of a helicopter's rotors filled the valley air. A Black Hawk lowered itself into a nearby field like thunder rolling from the sky. The diner froze. Even Rick and Duke stepped back, uncertain now. The door opened. A tall man with silver hair and an unshakable gaze stepped in. His voice was firm, not loud. Colonel Henry Walker. Henry turned, slowly, stood. Sir, the man said, saluting with precision. I'm General Marcus Granger. We received word there was an incident involving you, and we don't let our own face disrespect alone. Gasps filled the room. Sammy dropped the coffee pot. Mrs. Thelma covered her mouth. The general continued. Your daughter was under my command in Kabul. We've never forgotten her sacrifice, and we sure as hell won't stand by while her father's honor is insulted. Rick stumbled backward. We didn't mean anything by it. It was just a joke. Granger turned sharply. Joking about sacrifice isn't funny. You have 2 choices: apologize like a man, or face a federal investigation for harassment of a decorated veteran. Rick's face drained of color. Duke looked like he wanted to disappear. We're sorry, Rick muttered. Louder, Granger demanded. We're sorry, both men echoed, trembling. Outside, more SUVs arrived, more soldiers. The Black Hawk remained overhead. Cameras from nearby news vans began to gather someone had tipped them off. Henry remained silent. His dignity had spoken louder than any threat. Granger turned to Sammy. You stood up when no one else did. This country needs more people like you. He handed Sammy a small wooden box, inside the Civilian Valor Medal. The room, the town, the country would never forget what happened that morning in Boone. The scene outside Mel's Fuel and Diner had become surreal. Locals stood at the edges of the parking lot, unsure whether to step closer or just stare. The American flag on the old pole flapped hard in the wind like it too sensed something sacred was happening. Rick, the loud biker who started it all, sat on the curb now, head bowed, leathers soaked from the cold ground beneath him. His friends had left, but something in him wouldn't let him walk away. Inside, Henry sat quietly again. His coffee had gone cold, but no one dared offer more. He didn't need it. He had presence now. Weight. Even in silence. Rick finally stood and approached the door. He didn't swagger this time. He limped awkward, unsure, humbled. He removed his sunglasses, face bare, voice raw. I didn't know about your daughter, about you. I didn't know any of it. Henry looked up but said nothing. Rick kept going. My dad was in Vietnam. I never knew him much. Always angry. I guess I carried that with me. His throat tightened. But that doesn't excuse what I did. I thought you were weak. Henry finally spoke. You thought wrong. Rick nodded slowly. Yeah, I did. Outside, the general and his men watched. General Granger didn't move. This wasn't a moment for military protocol. It was a civilian reckoning. Inside the diner, the mood shifted. Sammy, behind the counter, stepped forward. People mistake quiet for weakness. That's their first mistake. He looked Rick dead in the eye. Second mistake is thinking people like Henry here are alone. Rick turned to Henry once more. I'd like to make it right, however I can. Henry looked down at the photo of Ava again, faded, but still vibrant in his eyes. You can't undo what you said, Henry said softly, but you can change what you do next. A long pause, then Henry slid the coffee cup across the table. Sit, share a cup, starts with respect. And Rick did. He removed his vest, sat, poured himself a cup from the communal pot Sammy had just brewed. Steam rose between two men who, moments ago, were strangers across battle lines of misunderstanding. Outside, kids stopped to watch. Inside, conversations resumed. But now, every voice spoke softer, more aware. Henry's cap still rested on the table, beside the folded photo, but the weight it once carried now felt shared. From that moment forward, Rick became something else. Not just a biker, but a man who had seen. And Henry, he remained unchanged in words, but everything around him shifted, because one moment of humility, when answered with grace, has the power to transform more than just a man. It can transform a town. The sun had risen fully now. Golden light poured through the front windows of Mel's Fuel and Diner, casting long shadows across faded tile and half-finished cups of coffee. The storm had passed, but its aftermath left something unexpected in its wake: hope. Rick, now sitting beside Henry, stayed long after the cameras left. He asked questions, listened, shared a story of his own: a failed marriage, a dishonorable discharge, a string of bad choices. I've been angry for a long time, he confessed. Thought the world owed me something. Henry stirred his coffee slowly. The world doesn't owe us, he said, but sometimes it gives us a second chance anyway. It wasn't a lecture, just truth plain spoken, weathered by experience. By the next morning, word had spread across Boone and beyond. The story had hit local radio. The footage had been picked up by a national morning show. But the biggest ripple, it came from a simple idea planted quietly in Sammy's mind as he watched Henry and Rick that day. He cleared out the diner's old storage room in the back, hung an American flag on the wall, brought in folding chairs, a coffee maker, and a handwritten sign that read, Veterans Coffee Circle, Thursdays at 7 a.m., all welcome. The first week, only 3 people came. By the third week, 15 chairs were full. Some wore uniforms, some wore grief, but all of them found something: waiting community. Henry didn't talk much. He didn't need to. He showed up, brought extra sugar packets, sat beside younger vets who had returned from different wars, carrying different scars. And Rick, he kept showing up too, not to speak at first, but to serve coffee, to listen, to learn. Eventually, he started helping local veterans with their motorcycles, fixing what was broken, offering free tune-ups. He even brought his cousin, another vet who hadn't left the house in months. General Granger heard about the weekly gatherings and quietly sent boxes of supplies, coffee, notebooks, support flyers. No logos, no orders, just support. Even Senator Grace Morgan, representing Western North Carolina, stopped by one day. No speech, just thanks. This is what healing looks like, she whispered to Sammy. Boone changed, not in grand, sweeping ways, but in the small ones that matter most. Strangers waved more. Kids asked more questions about the flag. People looked twice before dismissing someone as just another old man. It all began with one cruel comment, one unexpected stand, one man's quiet endurance. And now, it was turning into something far more powerful. A place where every veteran, and every broken soul who needed purpose, could start over. 6 months passed. Boone, North Carolina, still had its quiet mornings and empty roads. But something had changed not just in the town, but in Rick, and most of all, in Henry Walker. At first glance, Henry looked the same. Same coat, same worn boots, same tattered marine cap placed carefully on the table before each coffee. But his eyes had softened. He started smiling a bit more small, fleeting gestures that meant everything to those who knew him. He greeted the diner regulars by name, even told a joke once, shocking poor Sammy so much he nearly dropped a plate. It wasn't just the town healing, Henry was healing too. For years, Henry had lived with silence, not just the absence of noise, but the weight of unspoken sorrow. Losing his daughter had left a hole too deep for words. But the Veterans Coffee Circle gave him something no ceremony ever had: connection. He wasn't just a face in a frame, a folded flag, or a line in an obituary. He was part of something again. His stories, when shared, carried value. He began mentoring younger veterans, quietly, without judgment. One afternoon, Elijah, a 32-year-old who had done 2 tours in Syria, broke down in tears mid-sentence. Henry didn't speak. He placed his hand on the young man's shoulder, nodded, and sat beside him for an hour. No words, just presence. It was more powerful than any speech. Meanwhile, Rick's transformation deepened. He'd shaved the beard, started showing up early to help Sammy prep the diner, stopped riding with the old crew. Instead, he applied for a job at the local vet center and got it. He ran a motorcycle repair workshop for returning soldiers free of charge. Each bike restored was a symbol broken things could be rebuilt. Rick also started bringing his son, a teenager named Jaden, to the diner every Thursday. Jaden watched his dad clean tables, refill coffee, and ask veterans about their lives. The boy who once mimicked his father's anger now mimicked his growth. And Henry, he didn't say it out loud, but in the stillness of his eyes, it was clear he was proud. The town watched all this unfold quietly, like a flower blooming slowly through concrete. People who once hurried now lingered. Neighbors who once nodded now sat down and listened. Grief hadn't left Henry, but now it walked beside him, not ahead of him. He once thought his days of service ended on the battlefield, but the real service, the one that saved more than it lost, was happening right here, in this diner, with a pot of coffee, a circle of chairs, and the simple, radical act of showing up. A year had passed. Mel's Fuel and Diner now had a new sign posted beside the coffee counter, one that stopped every customer in their tracks. This table reserved for Colonel Henry Walker, hero, father, friend. The table, tucked near the front window, remained untouched every Thursday morning. His old Marine cap rested under glass, his daughter's photo beside it. A fresh cup of black coffee, 2 sugars, placed faithfully by Sammy at 700 a.m. Henry had passed quietly in his sleep just weeks before. No pain, no spectacle, just peace. But in Boone, his legacy grew louder every day. The Veterans Coffee Circle now filled 2 rooms. Sammy had expanded the diner's back area, turning it into a cozy gathering hall with couches, service dogs, and donated books. A plaque on the wall read, "Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it sits in silence, offering comfort." Rick, now clean-shaven and working full-time with the North Carolina Veterans Initiative, gave the eulogy at Henry's memorial. His voice cracked midway. "This man," he said, hand trembling, taught me what strength really looks like. Not fists, not noise, but compassion. Quiet compassion. The funeral drew hundreds. Men in uniform. Old friends who hadn't seen Henry in years. Even Senator Morgan, who once stopped in for a handshake, now returned to deliver a tribute. Colonel Walker never asked for glory, but he gave us a reason to remember what honor looks like. At the sound of taps, every head bowed. Rick folded the flag with military precision, placed it into the arms of a young woman, Ava's goddaughter, who Henry had helped raise in his later years. And then, the town changed again. The anniversary of that first Thursday, the day Rick made the call, and the world showed up, was declared Veterans Honor Day across the county. Schools led essay contests on sacrifice. Churches held prayer services. The diner served free coffee to anyone who had ever worn a uniform. And every single year, Sammy stood beside Rick at sunrise, pouring the first cup for the empty table by the window. Jaden, now 16, took over kitchen duty during school breaks. He wore a pin on his apron that simply read, "He stood, so I could learn to." What began as a moment of cruelty had become a lifetime of meaning. What started with silence ended in unity. Because of one man, one worn cap, one quiet life lived with unshakable dignity. Henry Walker never raised his voice. He never needed to. His courage echoed loud enough for all of us. True courage isn't found in loud speeches or bold declarations. It lives in the quiet, consistent acts of integrity. Colonel Henry Walker didn't chase recognition. He didn't ask for attention. He simply showed up every week holding on to memory, honor, and quiet strength. But when disrespect knocked, it wasn't power or status that stood against it. It was compassion, community, and moral courage from an unlikely source, a diner cook named Sammy. In a world quick to judge and slow to listen, their story reminds us that dignity must be defended, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's uncomfortable. Respect is not about protocol, it's about presence. It's about standing up when others stay silent. And sometimes, all it takes is one person saying, "That's not okay," to ignite a movement that ripples across generations. If you own a business, consider small gestures discounts, reserved parking, or even just a sign that says, "We honor those who served." And when you see someone being disrespected for their age, silence, or scars, speak up. It might feel small, but as Henry taught us, the ripple of a single voice can reach the farthest shores. If this story touched your heart, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful true life moments. Let's start a movement. Comment respect if you believe our veterans deserve to be honored every single day.